Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to get rid of my transcript because that for me is distracting as I'm trying to talk to you. Okay. Just to bring everybody up to date, because we didn't record this from the very beginning, that I have this feelings chart and I'm asking, imagine you're walking into the classroom for the first time, new classroom, what kind of emotions might you feel? And people came up with determined, anxious, excited, and a variety of feelings. And I think it's important that we recognize what those feelings are. And somebody pointed out that these feelings, the students are going to pick up on those feelings, and they have feelings of their own. Their chances are that they're a bit excited, perhaps determined, and nervous as well. And that's going to play a role in our classroom management. If we come in, concerned or very, very anxious that, oh my goodness, there are 25 of them, there's one of me. What happens if they gang up on me? What happens if I can't do this job properly? Then we're going to have a harder time managing our emotions. We're going to have a harder time managing the classroom. So these are just things to be very much aware of as you're thinking about classroom management. Okay, moving on. Now, what about in the classroom? Okay, so a couple of things.
Wait, go back to that. How did you get a picture of my classroom?
Well, I showed everybody this classroom beforehand because this is the reason I chose this is because this is what we're trying to manage. Yes. It may be, we may feel that this is emotionally where we are. We're all over the place. They're all over the place. And this is exactly what we need to sort of manage. Okay.
That's a powerful image.
Okay. So setting clear expectations from day one. This is really important because this gives the students a feeling of safety. They know what to expect. They're not worrying, what's going to happen if I do this? Or, setting the stage for a safe environment is really important for managing a classroom. So when we outline rules and policies that are in the syllabus, students know what it is that they can expect. When we communicate technology use guidelines, what are laptops for note-taking only? Is that the rule? Whatever you determine is the rule, that's what should be kind of communicated to the students ahead of time. Now, you can also be consistent but flexible. Acknowledge the students' diverse responsibilities, acknowledging the students' diverse note-taking style, for example. Let's say you have a policy, laptops are only for note-taking, right? And yet there is a student who perhaps wants to do some research about the topic on their laptop. Are they allowed to do that? Let's say they ask that question, and you can determine that on a case-by-case basis, or you may say, let me think about that, and we'll talk about, just understand that you can be consistent and yet you can be flexible. And that's sometimes a little hard, that balance between being consistent and flexible can be difficult. I can just tell you a story from my own high school experience. We had an English teacher. And at the time, we're talking about the 1980s or even the 1970s, this might have been, where when you came into the classroom and you were given a textbook, you were told, go home and have it covered. I don't know if anybody remembers those days, right? You have to take a brown paper bag and cover your textbook because it would protect it. So, of course, everybody in the classroom is given this textbook and they say, oh, do we have to cover it? Right? That's the typical thing that you're going to get, pushback. And what does this one teacher say? She says, you know what? Nah, don't cover it. You don't have to. I remember the moment of it was literally a moment of silence in the classroom, and then all havoc broke loose because that teacher lost complete control over the classroom at that moment. And we pushed her, and she showed herself to be inconsistent. If we just say, you know what, just go and cover it, it's no big deal, but we stay consistent in our expectations, they will respond, the students will respond in kind. Okay, also, you want to give a brief overview at the beginning of each lesson, and you can start that pattern from day one. Day one, this is what we're going to do, and have that expectation so when students come in, again, they feel safe. They know what to expect from that day. Does that mean you cannot veer off? No, but just tell them, you know what, this came up, this was my lesson plan or whatever, but somebody brought up a really good point, and I think we should spend some time talking about that. But just acknowledge that. Show that you're consistent and yet you're flexible. Any comments or questions on this? Okay. And if you do have a comment or question, please just either raise your hand, put you can unmute yourself. We're a small enough group. Okay. The next thing is to foster an engaging and inclusive learning environment. Okay. If students are sitting there and they're kind of like, well, I don't even know what to do next. I can't follow that lecture. It's too fast for me, or it's too slow and I'm really bored. You're going to lose control, if you want to call it that, over the students. They're going to start wanting to do something else. So when you foster an engaging and inclusive learning environment, use active learning strategies, discussions, case studies, group work. The students are actively involved. There is far less of a chance that they're going to, quote unquote, cause trouble. Okay. Encouraging participation while respecting different communication styles. Okay. So you don't, don't force somebody to participate in the discussion, but rather encourage them to do so. And keep a tab on that one student who's not giving over something in the discussion. Do they look interested in the topic, or are they busy on their phone and they're really disengaged? Because a person can be very much engaged without actually actively participating in something, if that's a better style for them. Another personal story, which was a really interesting one, is I was giving here at Carlow a workshop before COVID, long time ago, on discussions. And I had the group of faculty participate in a discussion amongst themselves. And then I called everybody together and I said, and I was noticing who was actually participating. There was one instructor who actually was outside the group, but seemed very interested. And when I asked for okay, could you summarize what you spoke about, etc., and what were highlights of the discussion, it was only that one faculty member who actually had anything to say. So I thought that was really an interesting dynamic, that she did not participate in the discussion, but she took from that discussion something valuable. So it's not only about actively participating, but it's that mental engagement that you're looking for as well. Okay. Being approachable is really important. Okay. Use the student's name. Acknowledge their contribution. Something like, John, he really did that well. And so acknowledge it to the classroom, acknowledge it and use their names. And if you struggle with remembering people's names, you're teaching 4 classes, each of them have 25 students, and you just can't remember 100 names the first 2 weeks, which is understandable. Ask people to put on a name tag because you want to remember their names. That shows that you would like to get to know them. And those things are really important. You're showing interest. You show that you're approachable. You show that they can that they can engage with you, not just with the material, which is really important for them. Okay, any questions or comments, any additions you want to add? Okay, and again, feel free to just chime in. Okay, I know sometimes the presenter doesn't give the participants enough time to formulate a question and actually give it over. So don't worry, if we move on, you can still come back to this. Okay, manage disruptions and maintain authority gracefully. Okay, this is really important. Very often when there's a disruption, a faculty member, an instructor who's a little bit less secure is going to take that personally and is going to right away become defensive. Okay, notice your tendency. If you do that, just notice that tendency and be aware of when a disruption triggers you. Because once you're triggered and you feeling defensive, you're not going to be able to handle that effectively. So be careful and just try to handle them on side conversations. If somebody says, "Oh, this is so dumb," you know, somebody comes up with something like that. So some instructors might take that personally and they become defensive. So try to handle that on the side. Try to handle like with a smile, something like, "Yeah, it does feel kind of stupid, doesn't it?" You know, not making a big deal about it. Those are ways to handle small disruptions. Okay. Set discussion norms to balance students' voices. Okay. Can you tell me, like, who has something to say in 3 sentences or less about this topic? Okay, can you answer that person in 2 minutes? Right? Keeping those the expectations and the norms. How do we discuss something? Okay, yeah, okay, you know, Sarah, you've already said something. I'm wondering if, you know, if somebody else has something to say about this. So trying to keep those things balanced, and you can express at the beginning of a discussion, like, you know, I'm going to try to make sure that everybody can get a chance to say something. And you can ask people to self-monitor. There's something like, "Yes, we've heard from you. That's great. Do you think we could give somebody else a chance to speak?" And maybe the person will like it, but I really wanted, this will really contribute to the discussion. And that's going to be, you know, maybe let them. Kind of keep it calm and keep it like, you know, not very strictly structured in the sense that like, no, these are the rules and we cannot deny those rules. Okay. Handle challenging behavior privately when possible. That's, you know, to make sure that it doesn't get to be in the thing is like, you know, it sounds like you're having trouble. Could you, maybe let's bring this outside, or let's talk about this after class. So something, keeping your voice mild is very important. Okay. Did I? No, yeah. Okay, we're up to this one. Okay, use technology and time effectively. Okay, leveraging interactive tools can boost engagement, keeping things moving. Like, okay, now that we've had this discussion, let's take a look at that poll. And then it keeps people engaged. Okay. Using the institution's LMS, okay, in this case, Brightspace, for assignments, announcements, and resources. That's using technology effectively because students can always go back to something. If they missed something, they're not going to get upset. They know it's over there in Brightspace. Okay, using things like if the student needs some help in writing or something, they're struggling to express themselves. They're given a paragraph, write about something, and they're really struggling with that. A student who's struggling in the classroom is going to feel embarrassed and is going to have more of a tendency to act in an inappropriate way. So if you can help lessen their frustration in the classroom by having them make an appointment with the what is it called? I can never remember the initials. With the tutoring service. Have them do that, keeping them to the least frustration. CAA, yes, thank you. Okay, thank you, Kathy. I always forget those initials. Um, to make sure, use those resources that you have available. Use the resources of the library to be able to bring in things that the students may not be able to find so easily on their own. Okay, and start and end class on time that respects the students' schedules. You know, sometimes an instructor will say, you leave this classroom on my time, right? Okay, but that's could be disrespectful to the students. They have busy lives, they have things to do, and you know, maybe they're gonna miss lunch if you keep them 10 minutes late. And is that right? You know, so, and starting on time is also important. If they come late, that's their problem in a sense. They, you know, it's not a, it's a, it's something that they have to deal with. And you can help them deal with that. Like, okay, what can we do to help you come on time? You know, how, you know, you can meet me after class or at in my office hours to figure out how you can catch up on material. But it's going to be, the onus is going to be on them to come on time, but you start on time. You know, you start your class when the class starts. Okay, any questions or comments on? Okay. Okay, providing constructive feedback and supporting student success. Okay, give timely and actionable feedback with clear rubrics. This can be a struggle for people who are grading long papers, right? If you, to give that timely feedback, you've got 25 40-page essays or whatever it is, 40-page 40-page reports that you have to grade. How can you do that in a timely way? Okay, so number one is if you come tomorrow to our lunch and learn, we will talk about AI tools that might be able to help you with that. But for today, just keeping the feedback timely. Perhaps you want to just give a skim through the first time and give them just general feedback, and then say more specific feedback is coming in a week. You know, that gives them that idea that my work is important to you, to the teacher. If I feel like, oh, the teacher doesn't really care about my work, then it's not going, they're going to be less likely to be engaged in the classroom, in the class in general. Give another story from my high school years. Okay, so I went to a high school which we were together. It was a private high school. We were together all the way actually from kindergarten through 12th grade, give or take one or two students here and there. But we were a really close-knit bunch. And there was one teacher who he would give homework every night, but instead of collecting everybody's homework, he would roll the dice, and because we were in 6 rows, and he would roll the dice and say, okay, row 2, your homework we're going to collect today. So what did we do? We realized that he's not that interested in knowing what we have to say about our homework. So what we did is that we had a rotation that every night one row would do the homework. And then let's say row 1 did the homework, but row 4 was the one that was called on to give it in. So they would hand their homework over to row 4, who would write their name on it and hand it up to the teacher. Now that was not very good. Obviously, we weren't learning a whole lot from our homework, but the point is that we didn't feel that the teacher really cared about our homework. Thank you. So the point, if the teacher had really cared about our homework, then we would have felt that they really cared. Maybe don't give homework every night. Maybe only give it once a week and collect it all. Whatever it was, it was the feeling that they don't really care. And that's what led us to, to that creative idea. Okay. Recognize effort and progress, not just correctness, right? That's very important because that is something that's that keeps a student engaged. If they have to be perfect in order to get their paper mentioned, then they're going to become disengaged, the ones who are not going to be perfect. So that's another way to keep the engagement going. Okay, offer accommodations and create an inclusive, respectful space. So if you see that a student is struggling with something, or the student comes over to you and says, I really can't do X, Y, and Z, the attitude to create an atmosphere, the attitude should probably not be something like, well, suck it up and do it anyway. We've all got to do this kind of work, and you're just going to have to do it, right? But creating perhaps a space which says, well, what part of it can you do? Okay, so why don't you do that part and add 3% more? Okay, great, we can do that. And just if the student is more sees that their needs and their things are being accommodated, then they're going to become more engaged and more respectful in the space. Okay, any comments or questions about this? Okay, I'm just going to ask you for some feedback in general. Can you put into the chat or raise your hand and just say how are you feeling about what I'm presenting? 0 being this is awful, 5 being this is absolutely wonderful, the best thing you've ever heard. And oh wow, thank you, Alexis. Okay.
I'm just appreciative that somebody understands the journey. I'm getting some validation here.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, I didn't do it for my own. Thank you, David. I didn't do this for my to pat me on the back. I wanted to really get some feedback. Is this helpful? But okay, thank you.
I think it's super helpful for me just to hear, the other people understand the pain points. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's really great. Like Jen said, and the veteran prof agrees with everything you're saying. Yep. Glad to know I'm in good company.
Okay, great. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the. Okay, this is something that I learned when I was a totally veteran teacher and I had no classroom management skills at all. So the person who was mentoring me, which thank God I had a really good mentor, well, he said, use your presence. And what that means is when you come into the classroom, you just by virtue of the fact that you are the instructor, you are seen as an authority figure. You don't have to be an authoritarian figure, but you are the authority figure in this classroom. Use that authority in your physical body. So number 1 is walk into the classroom with calm energy, empathy, and confidence. They're going to pick up on that, even if you have to fake it. Okay? I mean, don't fake it too much because it's going to come off as fake. Try to get yourself into that calm energy, empathy, and confidence as you walk into the classroom. Okay, walk around the classroom so that your presence is felt. If you're the kind of instructor who just sits at the front and just sits at the desk and kind of talks to everybody, you're going to have less engagement. Your presence in the back of the room is not going to be as felt. Okay. Casually walk closer to someone whose behavior might need some redirection without engaging with them, without interacting with them. You see somebody who's like, throwing darts or making paper airplanes, whatever. Just walk casually towards them. Okay, and as you're walking around the classroom, you walk towards them and then you can walk away, but just so that they feel your presence. Not threatening, not like glaring at them and, with sharp eyes, like, how dare you? Just let your presence be felt. And that's a real good use of your presence in classroom management. Okay, and if someone is not paying attention, okay, don't call on them in an embarrassing way. Use your presence to be respectful of them. And you might be able to say something like, okay, Kevin, I'm going to call on you next for the next question. So just be aware, and so you can bring their attention back, but don't call them out like, well, Kevin, what do you have to say about this? And they weren't paying attention, so they're going to be embarrassed. So use your noticing of what's going on in the classroom in an effective and respectful kind of way. Okay. Okay, thank you, Kathy. Okay, now, though, we are actually going to go on to some scenarios. And this is where I'm going to ask you to all unmute if you possibly can and really talk about this. Okay, so here. First of all, before we actually do that, let's go back. Any questions or other comments on what we've just done? Okay, great. So here are some scenarios. Okay, the repeatedly disruptive student. Okay, you're teaching an in-person course with 15 students. One student, Jalen, frequently interrupts discussions with off-topic comments, dominates conversations, and speaks over classmates. Other students are visibly frustrated, and some have begun disengaging from discussions. You've also noticed that a few quieter students seem hesitant to participate. Okay, anybody ever have such a scenario? Can't imagine it, but let's just say it ever happens. Okay. Okay. So how would you address Jalen's behavior without discouraging their enthusiasm for participation? Any thoughts or comments about that?
I mean, he does need to be discouraged a little bit. So I would ask him, can you please explain how your comment relates to the topic we were discussing?
Okay, great. Kathy, any thoughts?
Most of the time, like if you're keeping it kind of light, you could say, okay, let's get back to topic, like that. So that can work, and then it pulls everybody back in. It just depends on the cohort and how they get along together, usually for what's going on. Usually you could have cohorts that are really great and then other ones that it's a struggle. So it just depends, on the dynamic of that class.
Okay, great. And that is something that probably talks back to that thing about the emotions. You're coming in and you need to also be aware of what's going on in the classroom. What's the general, maybe you come in and like everybody's tense and like you might even ask like, what's going on? Something happened, maybe one of their friends, is ill or something.
Right.
And so they, like it's not only about the subject that you're teaching when you come in. You're coming into a social situation. And that's something that that's when you can feel out like, okay, what's happening here, and see, like as you mentioned, what is the cohesion like in the class, etc.
Right.
That's all very important information. Okay, great. Okay, anything to say, Kira, about this? Or I don't mean to call you out, I just didn't know if you had any comments.
You can call me out. That's okay. I'm
Okay.
actually kind of just soaking everything because I am not a veteran professor.
Okay, well, well then, okay, well, that's great. So think
Karen,
about
we can have coffee someday if you want.
Fair enough.
Okay, great. Okay, what strategies could you use to re-engage the other students and foster balanced discussions?
So saying let's hear from someone else is definitely the people in the room who are getting frustrated with the monopolizer understand that they're understood, that their frustration is understood, and that it encourages the reluctant person to put their hand up.
Okay, great. Any other strategies?
Or does
I've
anybody
used-
have a different view on this? That's
Yeah.
another good one.
I've used some group work. Let's say they hate calculations or, you know, or case studies, and I have them working different groups, and then the group comes up and presents. So it's not one person that hates to present that'll feel a nervous wreck. They come up and because they might be the one that's really doing a lot in that group, but somebody else is better at presenting it, but they come up and present as a group. And that allows participation, and it allows, you know, it engages people.
Okay, great.
Think, pair, share is another version of that where if you don't want to take the time for people to come up and sit down and whatnot, you just sort of go around the room, have a spokesperson from each group, and that way everybody's talking.
Right. Oh, okay, great. Wonderful. Those are really good strategies to engage people. Okay. Okay, and how might you prevent similar issues in the future while maintaining an inclusive and respectful classroom environment?
You could lead off the course in your, like, the syllabus walkthrough day and say, look, I really want to hear from everybody. And if I figure out that somebody's sort of participating a lot and other people are participating a little, we might drop into think, pair, share. So you kind of set the tone and the expectation. I've never tried that, but I imagine it would work.
Okay. Well, what happens if you haven't done that and now you're in the middle of the semester? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've changed course in the middle of semester with classroom management, like in trying different ways of having group discussions. If the one is kind of somehow getting disruptive.
Right.
And that's
Okay,
fine.
great.
As long as I'm clear about it, I can shift to a
Exactly.
different
Right.
method.
And exactly, it's being clear, not feeling overwhelmed. Like it's kind of keeping that objective view in the sense like, okay, this isn't working. And it's not because, oh my goodness, I'm a terrible teacher or whatever. That's just the dynamics right now. This is just not working. How can I make this work better? Okay, great. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, the disengaged student. Okay, you're teaching in an in-person course with 12 students. One student, Cam, consistently sits at the back of the room, rarely makes eye contact, and spends most of the time scrolling on their phone. They do not disrupt others, but they also do not participate in discussions or group activities. When called on, Cam gives brief, disengaged responses. Other students seem to be aware of Cam's lack of engagement, and some appear frustrated that participation is not evenly distributed. Okay, anybody ever have this situation? Okay. Okay. So how would you approach Cam's disengagement in a way that encourages involvement rather than confrontation? Any bright ideas here?
Quite
This is tough
frankly, I mean,
stuff.
working with college students, and I view them as autonomous adults, they might be very successful with this strategy. I don't know what they're doing on their phone. So after the first quiz or first exam, I might say, look, you're not doing what you need to do to be successful here. Can I see your notes? Or Are you taking notes? Something like this. But yeah, I usually wait until after the first exam or quiz and see if they are successful. Maybe they like to get their information from somewhere else, or maybe their mind is rushing at 100 miles an hour and they need to be fiddling with something and not engaging it. Maybe they are on the autism spectrum and don't want to make eye contact. So I sort of let them be until I realize that they're not being successful.
Okay, and how do you approach them if you do realize, okay, that this is not a successful strategy for them?
I usually start with an email, feedback on a specific assignment, I usually start with, I want you to be very successful. I'm on your team. I notice that your grade is low on this and that you are, I don't know if you're taking notes or not. Have you tried that strategy? Something
Right.
like this. So sort of soft
Okay.
approach.
Right, great. Okay, Kathy, anything to,
There's a couple different scenarios that I think of with this. One, I've actually talked to students like on the side. There were some students, not so much at this university, but at another place that I worked night shift and had to work night shift and came in the morning to day class, was falling asleep, disengaged. And once you're aware of that, then you come up with other strategies to help them because they're really just trying to survive. I had another student that drew all the time, always sat in the front, but always was drawing. And so when I talked to her, she said, "This is the way I learn because when I'm drawing, it helps me to learn. It keeps her from thinking about other stuff or whatever." But that was her strategy to learn. And so, I might look at that and say, wow, that's really crazy. Why is she just sitting there drawing? She's not paying attention. But sometimes it just takes that to find out what's going on outside of, instead of me making an assumption, that this is going on. So that really helps is just talk to the student and see what's going on.
okay, great. And one thing that's coming out from both of your responses is an attitude of collaboration, an attitude of, curiosity, like, I'm here to help you. This is what, and that's really what this is all about, is when you can monitor your attitude, it's going to really make a big difference to the students and to your classroom management style. Okay, great. Okay, what classroom management strategies could help foster a more engaging environment for all students? So let's say you find out indeed that, they are disengaged, they're not taking notes, etc. So what classroom management strategies, aside from perhaps just approaching the student, what could be more engaging in the classroom that might be helpful? Sure.
I feel like that student. I don't do this because I teach mostly online, and now my day classes are mostly gone. But I know that especially Kim, she's very creative. They do polling to just make sure and scenarios. She does games, like she has Kahoot in there, and she does games to make things more interesting, such as farm, because farm can be very boring. But and April does the same thing where they have these interactive type things. So, that keeps students engaged and they like it. They want to compete with Kahoot to see who can beat each other. We've done things in the past because I used to work with Kim before, where we did Jeopardy. Or is it, you have the buzzers and you have groups. And so there's a lot of things that you could do to make them engaged. It's not going to be everything because you got to have some lecture. You got to have that lecture, but then adding this additional layer to help them.
Right. Okay.
A lot of my students work in the field already. And so I'll ask, has anybody ever experienced this in your jobs? And it's both an engagement thing because then I can take what they say and kind of run with a couple of things rather than straight lecture. but also it encourages the rest of them to get jobs in the field before they graduate, which is one of my evil secret missions for all students at Carlow. But that kind of storytelling, whenever a student is valued and is telling their expertise, I mean, everybody perks up when that happens.
Right. Great that you noticed that. Excellent. Okay. And how can you balance respecting students' autonomy with setting expectations for active participation?
I mean, I just keep it conversational. If somebody chooses not to participate, I don't go after them in any way. That's their MO.
Right.
If they're shy, I let them be shy. If they're having a bad day, they can have a bad day. So just taking what I get from the participation. And if the whole room's silent, I'll poke fun at them. Like, what was there, a party last night? Like, what the heck's going on in this room? You guys are zombies. Like, come on. And that kind of ha ha ha, okay, fine, I have something to say. That works pretty well.
Okay, great. Okay. And I think that, allowing them, but one of the is again what I'm good. I don't think I've said this before, but it's also focusing on your objectives. Like if we're having a discussion here and your participation is absolutely required in order for you to achieve the objective, how can we make that work if you're really shy? Those kinds of things. Yeah, Kathy.
We've done participation scores, like every class you get 5 if you make some kind of participation. If we have really classes that don't participate, then you'll have people that even if it doesn't even have to be much, but at least they're engaged.
Right.
I don't like to do that, but sometimes you have to. It just depends on your class.
I've never forced participation like that, where it's absolutely critical for everybody to participate. But I know of a hack for the shy folks is to pass out index cards, and people can write their contribution instead of speaking and then hand those in. And as long as they're adequate, they get whatever points are given. I don't give points for participation. I find it to be too forced. I like my classrooms to be more organic, and it works pretty well.
I haven't had to do it here. It was in like an associate for-profit where you sometimes it's different.
Right. Yeah. That's it. And I was just recently in a classroom where I was taking a training, and one of the things that they did was that they had everybody get an index card. Everybody could write their thing, and all index cards were collected so that nobody knew who was participating and who wasn't, because that was the instructor would know, but nobody else felt like, oh, that person was like, we have to pity him, he can't say his discussion out loud, he whatever. So that it was just an interesting strategy that I thought was a very good one in some situations, to have everybody have the ability to participate on paper and nobody knows who did and who didn't.
I have one other strategy there. I lied. I didn't think about this. There are a couple of topics that I do want everybody to discuss. And what I do is even for in-person classes, I move them to online discussions so that everybody has to post 3 times, even if we're a synchronous in-person class.
Yeah, we've done that too, as our discussions are online, even though and it's set up that we do like kind of flipped classroom where they are actually participating. They write some test questions and the other students answer the test questions, and we put it like a discussion. And then I can look at what they did before I come into the classroom, and then we could talk about it. So that's another way to do it. And it really engages the students more with the flipped classroom. Because if not, they're so just trying to write everything down. But now they have that, they have some knowledge, so they ask questions because they don't understand something. And we changed most of our classes to flipped classroom.
That's
format
great.
for that reason.
Okay, great. And that's using that technology to your benefit. Great. Okay. Okay, the chronically late student. You're teaching a course with 23 students. One student, Sam, consistently arrives 10 to 15 minutes late to class. They usually slip in quietly, but sometimes disrupt discussions or miss key instructions. Other students have started to notice and occasionally roll their eyes or sigh when Sam enters. You find yourself feeling frustrated by repeated lateness. However, when you briefly mention it to Sam after class, they simply apologized but did not offer any expectation, and the pattern continued. Okay, so can you address Sam's lateness in a way that encourages accountability without creating conflict?
Honestly, he's an autonomous adult. He's on his own. I don't address it.
Okay.
I mean, if he does disrupt, that's a different story. That needs to be addressed, probably an email.
Right. Okay, great.
Yeah, some students, you know, they got to get their kids on the bus and then they come to Carlow and there's no parking. And then, you know, usually the student will say, I couldn't find parking. I had to go all the way down to, you know, so most of the time that's the reason, you know, that they are late. So I do the same thing, you know, they're accountable. You know, hopefully they leave earlier to get parking, or if they have a situation that kids got to be dropped off somewhere, they're in the situation they're in, you know, so.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, what strategies can prevent disruptions caused by late arrivals while maintaining a welcoming classroom environment?
I mean, on the first day of class, I tell people if you have to come and go, I respect you and your needs, like just do so quietly and discreetly. I've never had this problem having set the
Okay,
tone. I don't know if it has anything
right.
to with
Okay, well,
me
maybe
setting
it
the
has to
tone at
do
the
with setting
beginning.
the tone. Yeah,
Yeah.
that could very well be. Okay, great. Kathy?
Yeah, usually they just come in if they're late and then sit down and then later they'll go, I couldn't find any parking. I'm sorry. And I'm
Right,
like, I can understand that. You know,
right. Okay, great. Okay, how might your own feelings of frustration impact your response to Sam? This is where we start getting into our understanding of our own feelings, right? If you know a person has the cultural notion that lateness is really terrible, okay, you know, and they're teaching a class, and so somebody comes in and they just they're late again. You know, maybe they have a good excuse, but they should have figured it out or whatever, you know, and that's just their own frustration. So what are some ways to reframe? And this could be not just frustration of lateness. It could be any frustration, yeah, that you're feeling with your students. What are some ways that you can reframe your perspective? And this is something that you could just think about because it's going to be a very personal thing. You know, different people are going to have different reframes that make sense to them about things, but just as a general thing about classroom management, how can you reframe your own frustration with students who are not participating, who are, not whatever they're not doing or doing that they shouldn't be, or you feel they shouldn't be? How can you reframe that so, okay, I think let's move on. We have about 15 minutes. Okay, the aggressive student. This, I think, is our final one, and this is something that I think some people get very nervous about. Okay, so this scenario is not extremely aggressive. I would say that your safety comes first, and if you have a super aggressive student, then it's the time to call for security to come in and keep people safe. But this is not a situation where people are being physically threatened or anything else. But this is a scenario that especially new faculty may be concerned about. If a person's had an experience with someone who's aggressive, they may be more concerned about this. Or anybody could be concerned about an aggressive student. And so let's take a look at this scenario. And if you want to give a different scenario that you might have experienced or highlight to something else, please feel free to do that. But so this one is, during a class discussion, Devin frequently challenges your explanations and the students' contributions in a confrontational manner. While critical thinking is encouraged, Devin's tone often feels dismissive or aggressive. Other students have begun shutting down, avoiding eye contact, or hesitating to share their thoughts. One day, after you present a key concept, Devin interrupts with, "That doesn't make any sense. I don't see why we should even be learning this." Their voice is sharp and the tension in the room rises. A few students exchange uncomfortable glances while another sighs audibly. You feel yourself growing frustrated, but also recognize that handling this moment poorly could escalate the situation or further alienate other students. So, first of all, does this scenario make sense to people? Okay, has anybody experienced this type of aggression or some other type of aggression in the classroom?
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced somewhat similar things. Never this exact scenario, but if a student expresses that they're not engaging with the material and that they disagree with what was said, I kind of layer on my expertise and just say, like, look, this is true in this scenario, this scenario, and this scenario, this is related to this concept, and just coming across with authority and expertise in a calm voice. Like, it usually de-escalates the situation and usually avoids this or discourages this from happening again. Also, if I need to kind of take it to the next level, like, look, this is a scaffolded class where this concept is related to the one from 2 weeks ago, and it's going to relate to the next. Remember that college is about learning how to think, not what to think. And so this is a carefully planned class. And if you pay attention, this is going to make a lot of sense that these concepts are tied together. And so usually I think that when a student behaves like this, they're reacting to a series of single facts in a minimal thinking, kind of a reactive way. Maybe they're trying to establish their own authority or worried about their reputation as being smart enough or something like this. And kind of redirecting and basically briefly letting them know that that's not what this is about. I don't say you're under a false impression that this specific fact is so important, but it is a validated fact. And so I don't know, I would just call it over explaining so that they kind of get that their reaction's inappropriate.
Okay,
without
so that's
attacking them
right.
personally.
So I guess that's interesting, is that what you're doing is bringing them back to the actual, to the cognitive idea of the discussion, as opposed to addressing their emotion behind it. So and that strategy is something you found effective too. Okay, great. Kathy, did you have?
One thing we found is that as a department, and we could do this because there's only 3 of us, and plus our adjuncts, which we know well, is to make sure that the rules are set and we abide by the rules all the time and don't. I'm not saying if somebody has an issue, a family issue, I'm not talking about that. But what I've found in the past, and this is a for-profit where you find all kinds of different things, where we had one person in the department that let this person get away with all this stuff till it escalated that I had to be between 2 students that were going to fight. This kind of stuff, if you don't keep those rules, basic rules, and they're not like respect for other students, respect, if not, they can run away with that. And, do all, there could be fights with the students, not physical like that, but it can happen. And so when we wrote things, actually, these are the expectations, whether it's clinical, whether it's here, whether it's, And they sign, I mean, it's part of this, the handbook and that kind of stuff. And it seems to keep people controlled, where you're not having, you know, I just met with somebody the other day that was complaining because there's people in their classroom that's using that board all over the place, even with the teachers, and I mean in aggressive ways and being aggressive with the other students. If you let that classroom get out of control like that, you're not going to get it back, you know? So
Right.
putting those expectations for professionalism, because our students are going into clinical and doing that kind of stuff and abiding by it and staying as a group, that this is what's going to happen, that it seems to not happen, if that makes sense.
Sure.
You know, now I've had people in my face. I had one student sent me something on an email and I said something back, and then I was in class and he was in my face and I just told him, back up. We will have a discussion, but you have to get out of my face. And then I explained, you're an adult. You have a choice. You don't have to. He was mad because he wanted the PowerPoint slides in the order of the questions on the worksheet, and he expected that to be done. And I said, you don't even have to do the worksheet. If you don't do the worksheet, you take a point deduction. You can do whatever you want to do, but it can escalate. That one had nothing to, well, that was even before we put rules in place. But sometimes they will escalate it. And it is scary in this atmosphere, but you have to stay controlled and control the situation the best you can and get help if needed. But, I feel that if I would have shown fear or given in, then that would have continued the bullying situations. So those are things that, like I said, you work on as a group, stay consistent, because as people get away with things, if they bully like that, with that one person from the for-profit, they will continue, and it escalates till I'm allowed to do this behavior, and then it escalates in the classroom where, I don't want to be standing between two people that are 6 foot tall, but I had to de-escalate the situation, you
Right.
know, and they got in the provost's face the same way, and the president didn't de-escalate that and allowed that to happen. So, see what I'm saying? You have to have that set of rules where it doesn't go beyond that, because it can become very scary,
Right. Sure.
especially in this day and age. You don't know. And
Right.
you have to be careful.
Yeah. So that's great. That what I'm hearing you really point out is your own demeanor of lack of fear and strength, and just saying, like, we're not going, like, please back off. Like, you can't, we can talk about this, but you're going to have to back off, and just without showing that fear, which you may be feeling.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah,
don't know. I mean, anything
exactly.
can happen. You have to look at things and say what can happen, because it can. We see
Right.
it every day, and we don't know where that person is. you know
Right.
um,
Exactly.
so but if they keep escalating, you can always, and you have rules set in place, then they either abide by the rules, or because what are they going to do when they get in clinical sites? They can't be telling people in the clinical sites this kind of stuff, and they're taking care of patients. So things happen, but keeping the control through what you have, they sign for it. Here are the rules, and here's what you have to abide by. And there has to be consequences to these behaviors if you have people really out of control like that. But if one person lets in your department, forget it. They're going to run amok and do what they, especially if it's like a program director or
Right.
something like that, or the president. When that
Yeah.
person was doing it with the provost, literally in the provost's face, screaming at him, and the president didn't back up the provost, you're going to
Yeah.
have this
Right.
really bad stuff happen. So
So,
it can
right. So,
happen.
yeah. And this is talking about, though, in the classroom, that maintaining one's calm demeanor. I think that that's one of the main things, is how to de-escalate the situation in the moment, while maintaining authority and is going to be your own demeanor. And
Yeah.
that's going to be tough. Just to
And-
recognize when you're afraid, that's going to be hard. But if you can, like, that's the kind of practice that ahead of time, or something so that you can feel confident that if something happens, and as you say, you never know when something's going to happen like that.
No.
But maintaining that calm, authoritative demeanor is going to help a lot to de-escalate. Okay, what steps could you take after class to address Devon's behavior in a way that encourages constructive participation rather than confrontation?
Try to engage in conversation where you show that you value what they're saying, even if it's
Yeah.
one-on-one.
Yeah.
Just
Okay,
starting,
great.
I really liked your paper, I like that thing that you discussed. What do you think about this? There was a new research finding on that. What do you think about that? So to have that intellectual conversation that is what should be happening in the classroom, maybe off to the side and kind of value what they have to say.
So you would not address that aggression directly, is what I'm hearing. And that's fine.
Oh, well, yeah, I would, but I was,
First, to start
yeah,
off.
then, but how do you get them back on the rails of class? That's the hardest
Right.
part.
Yeah.
If somebody's behavior needs to be corrected, that more often than not, they're going to shut down, fail the course, maybe earn a low grade, stop attending, that sort of things. But after addressing the aggression, like having a constructive conversation, I think can go a long way to repair the relationship.
Okay.
Because that's in my hands, not theirs. They're
Yeah.
never going to take that step.
Right. That's great. Okay, thank you. All right, and the last question, how can you balance allowing students to challenge ideas while maintaining a safe and respectful classroom environment? Because this is something that can be tough. I want you to challenge the idea, and I want you to be enthusiastic about your challenge, but not aggressive. And that for some students can be a tough balance.
I
Any
think it's
ideas?
just,
Yeah.
I think it's when you talk to the students and let's say you have presentations that they're doing on things that others may not agree with, let's just say, and may have strong feelings. For us, even explaining, you're going to be around a lot of different people at the hospital, a lot of different beliefs, like maybe I'm going to use an example, Jehovah Witnesses don't take blood products, but you are going to care for that person and have to, whether you respect them or not, or believe in what they're saying or not, you're going to have to get yourself in check and then be able to do this. So that helps whenever they're in the classroom, because they may not believe, and you can have respectful conversations about why you believe this or they believe that, but keeping that aggression in check,
Right.
and it
So
seems,
teaching them how to do that, basically.
yeah, and it seems now, I don't know with today's day and age, and maybe Jennifer has other things that she could contribute to this, is that there's very heightened stuff going on, so you don't always know, but just you have to keep that control, but they really have to learn how to have themselves in check, to be able to help others, because you're never going to agree with others that you're not going to 100% agree.
Right.
You may feel
100%.
that if they took this blood, I'm just using this as because it's a safe
Right.
scenario to talk about. This child could have been saved, but you didn't save them. So you're going to have that feeling that, why did the parents do that? But if you know that the parents and the child has that right to their beliefs, and you have to respect that. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to,
Right.
but you have to respect others,
Right.
and learning about others. And I do case scenarios and things about different religions and why they feel this way, and having that conversation, I think it helps.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We are about at time. So I'm going to kind of wrap up. If you want to just think about scenarios that you are concerned about, this presentation is really geared towards people without that much experience as you have. So, so for anybody watching this, once it's, think about scenarios that you may be concerned about, and please reach out to CTRL. We can help you with those scenarios and think about ways that you can manage your classroom. Okay, yes, thank you very much for sharing your experiences today. I think this is a very productive conversation. And thank you, everybody. I hope you have a good rest of your day. I really appreciate your participation.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline.